This meeting, this meeting is being recorded by the host or a participant. This meeting is being recorded. This meeting.
Greetings, I'm Comrade Sinkay. I'm chopping it up with Comrade Richie Rich Double R this evening. This is the Republic of New Africa's Black Nation Day weekend, March 31st through April 2nd in Charleston, South Carolina. This Black Nations Day theme is building unity on the way to plebiscite. Comrade Double R, since we both couldn't make it to South Carolina, we decided to address a major issue of concern to our Black nation. Our topic this evening is building the Black nation from the inside out, citizen development as a foundation for nation building. Comrade Double R, before we jump into the topic, do you have any general thoughts on Black Nation Day weekend?
Comrade Sinkay, free the land, and greetings to yourself and all of those out there in the viewership. I just want to say that I'm glad to be here. It is always good time when it comes Nation Day, conference time for us to gather, time for us to reflect on where we are as a nation, where we are as a people, and the things that we need to be addressing, thinking about, giving consideration to, and the actions that we need to be taking in the upcoming year. And this program is proof that we do that whether or not we are physically at the Nation Day conference. Nation building continues no matter who we're with or where we're at.
All right, brother Richard, we gonna jump right into the topic information and chop it up and break it down. I'm going to share my screen right now. And
Penny Anderson has started screen share.
the screen share is up.
All right.
And again, our topic this evening is building the Black nation from the inside out, citizen development as a foundation for nation building. What I'm going to discuss initially is how do we go from really a nigger identity to a new African identity. And this transitioning process, which is necessary, however, historically, we haven't really systematically put things in place to have an effective transitioning process. No real structure in place to deal with the inner baggage that we bring from internalized oppression to a conscious citizen of the Republic of New Africa. And this transition reflects an internal contradiction between the deep processed, socialized nigger identity, or just a basic African-American identity, which is really more American than Afro. And this contradiction was described by W.E. Du Bois from a quote from Souls of Black Folks. W.E. Du Bois stated, "It is a peculiar situation this double consciousness, this sense of always looking at oneself through the eyes of others, of measuring one's soul by the tape of a world that looks on in amused contempt and pity. One ever feels his two-ness, an American, a Negro, two souls, two thoughts, two unreconciled striving, two warring ideals in one dark body whose dogged strength alone keeps it from being torn asunder. Comrade Richie Rich, as New Africans, basically our movement has failed now for 5 decades to significantly transform this inner baggage, which has resulted in self-sabotaging behavior and compromising behavior that the forces of our oppression, like the FBI, has exploited. So let's piece this last paragraph apart.
Mm-hmm.
Self-sabotaging behavior. What's your thoughts on this self-sabotaging behavior based on your experience as a citizen of the Republic of New Africa and your observations?
Well, first thing I want to do is I want to address the quote there from Dr. Du Bois. I've always thought this is one of the most powerful quotes that exists out there. And when it comes to describing the mind state, the behavior, the character, and the situation of our people. Because when Dr. Du Bois first made this quote, we're talking about the early 1900s. He was describing a people who have two souls trapped in one body, one African, one American, in constant conflict, psychological conflict, tearing the body and tearing the mind asunder. And Brother Kenny, as you said, we have failed to properly address this quote unquote identity crisis, which has led to other identity crises. And I'm just imagine a people going along now for 100, 200, 300 years and counting, of having two souls trapped in one body, constantly fighting each other. Because this is what people have to realize and understand. It's not like we didn't just get to this point last year, today, 40 years ago, 60 years ago. It didn't just happen in your grandmother's time period. This has been going on as long as we have been in America, since we were kidnapped, stolen, and brought here under warlike situations. And so what it has led to, all of the self-sabotaging behaviors, as you just referred to them, are self-sabotaging behaviors that have gone undressed now for tens, hundreds of years, and they have led to what we see out here today, which is the menticide, the fratricide, the black on black homicide out of control situation, and all types of inner baggage that we all carry around with us that sabotages our day-to-day goals, our relationships, our personal relationships with one another, our attempts to secure and maintain and hold down jobs, housing. It sabotages our behavior, which comes from our mindset, sabotages most of what it is that we try to do in our everyday lives.
And also, Brother Richard, it has caused a lot of sabotage inside our own organizations, where we simply distrust each other in organizations. Yeah. We have problems with each other. We just dislike another person in the organization for just some superficial reason. just basically because they black, and I just got a problem with them, but I really don't know why I really got a problem with them. I just don't like this comrade. I don't like this person who's in leadership. I just don't like them. So that sabotaging behavior, which I'll address further, I'll really tackle it further. And then is the compromising behavior that the forces of oppression like the FBI have exploited and manipulated.
Definitely.
Because we bring people into the movement, and we don't really transform these individuals. And for example, the FBI infiltrates. They've targeted one particular comrade in our movement, and they'll go to another unsuspecting comrade who may dislike that comrade, so that person is vulnerable to actually believe gossip and slander from this infiltrator. And at that point, that person then can be won over to actually help murder this individual, or straitjacket this individual, or attack this.
Put the snitch label on them.
Yeah, all that kind of stuff. So what I'm saying is the FBI has used this like clockwork from the Garvey movement all the way up till Black Lives Matters.
I was going to say, Brother Kenny, someone listening or viewing this might say, oh, you talking about how they did us back in COINTELPRO days in the 60s and 70s. Another person might sit and say, oh, you talking about how they were doing us and during as the Black Lives Matter stuff was going on. No, you're talking about this is how they were doing as the FBI was first being born, as they went to go and attack the Honorable Marcus Garvey. You're talking about how they were doing during the COINTELPRO days of the 1960s and 70s. This is how they were doing it then. This is how they do it today. They have never had to change tactics or even adjust the tactics. The tactics work because of all of our self-sabotaging behaviors, because of our dual identity crisis, and because of all of the internal weaknesses that we bring into our organizations, and that we have not adapted to this and adapted to their tactics. So they don't even have to change it.
Isn't it? It's interesting. Richie, you used to be a teacher, right? And I'm quite sure that you would listen to your students and they would talk about how they would dislike another student for just some super petty reason.
Right.
Or you've been around unconscious Black folks and just some outright niggas who you hear, man, I don't like him. I don't like him. They can't even tell you the reason why they don't like the person. They just don't like him. And those same kind of people come into our movement, and those petty characteristics are not addressed, and those petty characteristics are now in the organization, and they wreak havoc.
Right. No doubt.
So our failure to address this inner baggage has undermined us as new Africans from realizing and putting into action the tremendous potential, intelligence, and power to create self-determination, land, and independence. I want to dive into now this inner baggage. First characteristic, individualism. Oftentimes, we really don't understand how deeply capitalism, Eurocentric individualism has really corrupted us on a deep level.
Right.
We can go back to how the system used in promoting individualism back in the 1960s to move us away from a collective struggle, and to move us toward a struggle that was really based on me, myself, and I. I remember when I was young, a young teenager, I remember when they had the Black exploitation movies, and they probably had 300 movies out there promoted just outright Black rugged individualism, get yours,
Right.
get paid, damn the people, damn the struggle. It's all about you. And that attitude was personified in two individuals. I remember the Mac and Superfly. And the Mac and Superfly was the personification of a self-made man, of a hustler who gets it all on his own. And the oppressor used Mac and Superfly to target and corrupt the foot soldiers or the recruits of the movement. Because prior to, these same brothers on the block was being organized really as revolutionaries in the Black Panther Party. And the system understood that had to be curtailed. They had to move away from revolutionary figures like Huey Newton, Malcolm X, Dr. King, and move them into this new personification of the only way you can make it, you got to make it as an individual. And what's interesting, they haven't stopped, and today they push individualism in the sense, you even hear rappers and even everyday Black folks talking about, I want to be like Donald Trump. I want to get it like Bill Gates. You know what I'm saying? I want to get it that way. Or of course, I want to get it like Jay-Z. I want to get it like Kanye. I want to get it like P. Diddy. You know, man, you only way out now, man, is you got to become a millionaire. And all this is just false consciousness, because in reality, a Black person chance of being a millionaire with a high school diploma or associate degree is 1%. You got a bachelor's degree, it's 3%. If you got a master's degree, it's 6%. So what I'm saying is this type of individualism is deeply ingrained in us, and we bring that type of individualism into the movement. And that individualism is, I'm in the movement, but I'm a do my own thing. You know, I'm gonna do what I want to do. I'm gonna fight against any type of leadership, any type of structure. I'm not gonna do. I'm in the movement, but I want to be a lone ranger in a sense. Don't try to check me, because I'm gonna do my thing. What's your thoughts on that?
Now I want to go back, because it is interesting that both Goldie, the main character in the Mac, and I'm trying to think
His name is Prince.
And Prince, the main character in Superfly. And there was one more, brother, my man Shaft from Shaft. Okay, these were the three, the triumvirate of the top Black exploitation movies of that time, that Black youth, especially Black boys and young Black men, were basically raised to look up to, and they were glorified at that time, mainly because they were on the screens. These guys were like role models to a whole generation of youth. We might not have wanted it that way, but Hollywood planned it that way, and that was the way it became, because there weren't any other alternative characters that were being promoted on the movie screen like that. And what happened is, if you go and look at all three of the movies, all of those characters were confronted by quote unquote Black revolutionaries, people who were in the movement, brothers who were in the movement, who tried to pull their coattails and say, hey, Goldie, you shouldn't be out here pimping. You shouldn't be out here selling this dope to Superfly. And to Shaft, you shouldn't be working that closely with the popo, with the man, to bring people in. All of them, the revolutionaries, were portrayed in a manner of being strange and weird and way off-center and just out of line with the new thing, which was the people needed to get money. That was the new thing. That was the new revolution, get money. Yeah. You had to fight the system in the same way that the black revolutionaries had to before them, but now it was the revolution was get money, get a big hog, a Cadillac, and surround yourself with a whole bunch of women. And that was the revolution, because Whitey didn't want you to do that.
Yeah, because you know the whole thing of it is that the new struggle was black capitalism.
Black capitalism, that's right.
Because Nixon, he really promoted, I remember, Nixon really promoted black capitalism. That's the solution. You got to get paid. And that's how we in the community translated. You got to get paid.
And as I was, by the time I was coming up, brother, we were past all that. We were rap had become a major force in black youth lives. And as I was a teenager, it was MC Breed and Tupac with the big song, I got to get mine, you got to get yours.
Yeah.
And then it was, and this was, you know, Tupac made, of course, other songs, but this is a black revolutionary making this key song that was driving a lot of people, just as De La Soul, which was an African center group, made the song, It's Just Me, Myself, and I.
Yeah.
So this shows the pervasiveness of how the black capitalist thing and the individualism thing had become when I was a teenager, and it just continued to explode, encouraged by Hollywood, encouraged by television, encouraged by all of the forces of the system, encouraged by school, encouraged by college, and encouraged by TV, to the point of here we are today. Where when you use words like community, black organization, we as the people look at you like, well, what you talking about? My people is my immediate family, and my community, there is no community. And I don't know what you're talking about, but I know I'm trying to get this house, this car, this job lined up so that I can do mine.
Well, yeah, as you mentioned, my family, and then the brothers in the street, my crew, you know, my fellow bangers, you know what I'm saying?
That's right, my gang.
And everybody got to get theirs. And then too, the young people that's going to college, it's, oh man, I'm gonna get my degree, man. I'm gonna come up, I'm gonna be rich. I'm gonna go to University of Michigan, man. I'm gonna get a degree, I'm gonna get paid.
Right.
And then YouTube, on YouTube, it seems like it's a million YouTube channels promoting getting rich. They all promoting getting rich.
That's also like it seems like 3 out of every 5 television series that are made now, especially if they're black ones, they're about the black dope dealer who was the man, is the man who is successful. They're all, I mean, whether you go from Power, all of the Powers, Snowfall, BMF, I mean, all of the top stuff that our people are watching, it's like the Black American success story is made off the street brother who sold dope, death, and reaped destruction upon his own community, but is now looked upon as being a hero.
Yeah, 50 Cent.
No doubt.
Talking about all
rappers, the rappers who give documentaries, if you were Chuck D of Public Enemy, you were Rakim or KRS-One of Boogie Down Productions. These two people are, if you go to anybody over age 45, these two people are looked at as being two of the greatest rappers of all time. But you won't find a decent documentary, nor definitely a Hollywood movie production on their life, because they're all based on the rappers who strictly rap gangster life, who say they sold dope and came up, and who are preaching the religion of me, I.
Yeah, the religion of getting paid. And
all those rappers have movies, brother. They got the Biggie Smalls, they all have movies and documentaries documenting the new American black success story, from dope dealer to rich man.
Yeah. And when you really look at this individualism, we've all been corrupted. And what happens is when we join in a movement again, is that this individualistic attitude, that goes against the need for us coming together as an organization, developing a collective attitude, de-emphasizing the I and emphasizing the we, but we've been so corrupted by that individualism. I remember when I was a government official in the RNA, the PCC, you couldn't even get so-called new Africans to even pay taxes. I mean, really, that type of individualism where we wouldn't give up $3 or $4 for the nation we profess to be a part of, the nation that we want, liberated. But at the same time, due to individualism, we didn't want to give up no resources. We wanted to use our resources for what I want to do. We didn't want to give up any resources for the nation. And this is the reason why today, unfortunately, when you look around with the number of new Africans, we should be having some type of new African institutions somewhere around the country. But as new Africans, we don't understand that we must fund the nation. We work for the system. We work for white supremacy. We pay taxes. We accept it. We pay taxes. We know they use their tax dollars for everything. Even we know they use their tax dollars against us. But at the same time, we accept that. But freely of our own will, we won't take some of our resources to support and finance our own nation so we can develop native intervention programs and institutions that could have positive impacts on new Africans. So we come into the movement with this whole individualism that really sabotages our ability to really finance ourselves as a nation in process.
No doubt. And you talking about at one time, we had a PG that was on a campaign for tax collection. And it was just like, it was pulling teeth to get people to pay taxes. There's not even that campaign going on right now. I mean, it's just not, people just aren't, they're calling themselves New Africans. But imagine calling yourself an American or not calling yourself an American, but living here and not paying taxes. We know that's just not going on. But what happened is the provisional government that is supposed to act on behalf of the nation, on behalf of all new Africans, without tax collections had no money in order to do things like proper fundraising, proper development, proper procurement of institutions and land. And they still don't have it. And until there is a successful campaign to raise and collect taxes from the citizenry, the PG won't have it. And other new African units throughout the nation will not have it. But this individualism thing, brother, that you said has affected us all, has totally corrupted many of us many of us aren't even really that conscious of it. But coming into organizations that are supposed to move in unison, in unity, making group steps, but people come in, and this has especially been super corrupted by the new social media age, where people come into organizations with no real intentions, brother, to follow their leaders and work with them and help them succeed, as the creed tells us all to do. But they come in looking at a group of people who they can coalesce with and now use in order to blow up their status on YouTube, Facebook, and all the other social media platforms, that they can use the organization's name and their connection and the work that they do and the pictures they take when they're out working to blow up their quote unquote brand.
Yeah.
We have people that are participating in Black organizations today to build brand identity, which is really an individualistic pursuit. And they're doing this way over anything that is along with their goals to help project the group. And that within itself has caused the decline and the destruction of many Black organizations that I have seen. that individualistic tendency?
Well, the next point is tied to individualism, and that's the invisible man syndrome, which is a thirst for recognition that leads to opportunism. Often, too, with the individualism, you know, as Black folks, oppressed Black folks, to a large extent, we're invisible. We're invisible. And we want to gain visibility. And the classic book by Ralph Ellison, The Visible Man, he begins the book with a character walking down a main thoroughfare in a large urban city, and he's walking down the street, and white folks don't recognize him. So he hollers out, basically, recognize me, recognize me, recognize me, and they don't recognize. And so for many of us, a lot of what we do, even in a movement, as you mentioned, an excellent point, a lot of times we come into movements and we come really building a brand. And the brand is way more important than the movement. And we're building this brand. And we're building this brand so we can gain recognition. Oftentimes, we're driven too by validation. We're in a movement.
Just 1 second. Just 1 second. I don't want anyone who's viewing this to misunderstand what we're saying either, because there's nothing wrong with people building brands and working to achieve brand identity for their company, for their issue, for their initiative. There's nothing wrong with that. There is something supremely wrong with people coming into organizations and working under false pretenses, or when that they're working for the organization when really their main goal is to build their brand, and they're misusing the organization and its principles and its paradigm in order to build their brand, or when someone is in an organization that they're supposed to be dedicated to, and they're putting 20% of their time and energies and efforts towards the organization's philosophy and principles, and 80 to 90 to 98% of their of that towards building their brand. That's where the problem comes in. That's where the organization and we, the people or the nation, lose out to individualistic pursuits.
Well, I'm going to give you an example. You'll have somebody in the movement and they're building a brand, okay? And the brand is name recognition. This individual's outspoken, denounces the system, can articulate well, can write well, and all of a sudden, they're recognized by the oppressor, whether it's on a local, county, state, or federal level. All of a sudden, that person gets their attention, and now that same individual that was in the movement, now they work for the local oppressors.
Right, right.
So I'm saying is there's nothing wrong with a brand to build a business, because see, when you're in a Black nationalist organization, whatever you do, it's about principles and it's about support. However, if the motive is, because you got to remember this, Richie Rich, ever since we were children, we were told in order to make it, you need to get recognition and validation from the oppressor. That's deep-seated in us. And that's why we have seen historically people go from the movement, then they become politicians.
Okay.
On various different levels. And we understand once they become politicians, we see in most cases how they ended up.
Yeah.
And we look at these individuals like, wow, man, this brother was in the movement. Now he's a county commissioner, he's city council, and man, this
or was sometimes even more head scratching is they go from being in the movement and denouncing these politicians to, because they're in the movement, because they're in front of people, they're in front of cameras and microphones, they become seen. And next thing you look up, they're working for the politicians who they were denouncing.
Exactly.
They're not even one. They're on staff. You know what I'm saying? Like, wow, okay.
Or they might get corporate attention.
Definitely.
I mean, they could be leading a boycott against a company. Like, for example, Coca-Cola, and the next thing you know, you see a brother, sister, and they got a 6-figure job.
Right.
So my point, was it about getting attention from the oppressor in the first place?
Yes.
Because what I'm saying is that invisible man syndrome is deeply rooted. It's deeply rooted. And I'm saying is that invisible man syndrome is tied to individualism. And both makes us vulnerable. If it's not checked and addressed, it makes us vulnerable for opportunism. Because then anybody, the oppressor, can deal with you on the basis, are you looking for an opportunity? Are you looking for money? Are you looking for a job? Do you really want to make a difference? Well, you know what I'll do? I'll bring you into my administration.
Right. Invisible man syndrome also makes people chase cameras, chase media. It leads people to do things that they ordinarily would not or should not do, because it drives them to be seen, to be heard by the oppressor, recognized by the oppressor. You have people going to places and receiving awards from oppressor-led organizations and corporations that when they get the call from them about getting the award, they really should just hang up on them. But the invisible man syndrome drives many of us to seek recognition and praise, even from those that are doing us harm, in many instances, when we just shouldn't be doing it.
I mean, you can look at a person like Al Sharpton. He's the epitome of it.
My goodness.
He plays both sides. He want to actually project that he really represent really the issues of Black folks. At the same time, he all about getting his.
I went to see Al Sharpton's movie Big Mouth, and it was a documentary on his life, and a lot of the good things that he's done on behalf of Black people. What was real interesting is Al Sharpton has a organization called the National Action Network. It has chapters in many cities. It has a sizable chapter here in Detroit, where I'm coming from, and where I live and am active. And it was interesting because in Al Sharpton's documentary movie, a 2-hour movie on his life, his actions, his activities, it all focused on him. And at no point, I think you might have seen 2 people who work with him in the New York National Action Network. It never focused on his National Action Network organization, what their principles are. You never saw them in a National Action Network meeting. You didn't know who his board members are. You weren't introduced to his vice president. You never saw the other members who work in his chapters across the country, because they're not important. It's all about Sharpton the man.
Exactly.
The one big mouth. You would have never had this with a Martin Luther King. Even when you look back on the Eyes and the Prize, you always see Martin Luther King, Dr. King, or Malcolm X meeting with their top lieutenants or talking about their organization and their principles. It was just about Sharpton.
So I'm just saying is that individualism and that invisible man syndrome, when those tendencies are not corrected, is that it sets individuals up to be opportunistic. And to a degree, those tendencies have become so paramount, we see the oppressors just cherry pick people out of our movement all the time.
All the time, no doubt.
The next,
and what about What about the next one that you have? We have here lined up, Brother Kenny.
Well, megalomaniac is extreme ego tripping and an obsession with power. And again, especially for Black males whose manhood has been so suppressed by the white man, is that in order to validate themselves, they become sort of like the alter ego of the white man in Black skin. And so you have this, especially in Black organizations, you have these tremendous egos, Black male egos. I mean, you have some females, but I mean, I would say the tendency is much greater with Black males because our manhood has been so suppressed. And that term megalomaniac was used by Donald Cox, who was the first deputy field minister of the Black Panther Party. He has a book out called Just Another Nigger. And in that book, he describes megalomaniac and he highlights the problems between and the beef between Huey Newton and Eldridge Cleaver and how that led to splits, factionalism, and bloody rivalries within the Panthers that caused a lot of fratricide. We even seen that played out in the Nation of Islam with Malcolm X.
Right.
So, megalomaniac is a tendency in our movement, because you got to remember, at times we in the movement, brothers and sisters who been in the street, whether they was in a street organization, gang, or they may have sold dope, and a lot of them come in the movement with these big egos, this megalomaniac attitude. And when it's not, again, identified and corrected, it wreaks havoc. And we can see that historically, especially within the Black Panthers and the Nation of Islam.
Megalomania and megalomaniacs too are often it is the fact and the continuance of individualism, indivisible man syndrome going unchecked, where no one says no, it's unchallenged, and it just grows and grows, and the ego grows within an individual to where their ego becomes Godzilla-like. You can't tell them, you can't tell the person anything, you can't critique them. If they are in leadership and they have authority and power, then everyone becomes afraid to say anything counter to them, to what their thoughts or their philosophies are, because there could be, you could be just booted out the organization. There could be physical consequences. They might just cause make it very clear with threats. I've even seen this with preachers in the church, in the Black church, that you cannot critique them, you cannot go against their thought, or somehow, the devil is in you. And so megalomania is a serious problem. It is dangerous.
I saw a megalomaniac on with Mario Badelli during the time when really Dimitri was trying to actually lead some very needed reforms within the PGRNA. And I saw, because of his founder syndrome and his megalomaniac, is that his ego was out of control to the point he used his influence within the leadership of the PCC to really, and his influence in the military to basically, force Dimitri, from the presidency. And I thought the brother was really trying to move in a very progressive direction to address a lot of weaknesses within the PGRNA and weaknesses amongst New Africans in general.
Well, for those who maybe newer New Africans who weren't around at the time, Mario Bedelli, one of the founders of the Republic of New Africa, and as now an ancestor, brother who's done many great things and has a tradition within the New African independence movement. At the time was no longer president, but still held a lot of sway within the New African independence movement. Brother Dimitri Marshall was the then president of the Provisional Government of the Republic of New Africa, was trying to address was trying to stand up the provisional government and address some things that had not been addressed in a long time and put the movement back on a progressive path. He was doing the thing like trying to get the campaign for taxes and move people towards meeting and doing things as local New African units and that type of thing. And for reasons that you just outlined, I guess maybe he was not in touch with Brother Obedelli and getting his approval for his moves and everything. And Brother Obedelli used his sway, his enormous sway within the movement and within the PG to basically get Brother Dimitri Marshall out of office and to stop the progress, which was really good progress that he was making. And there really hasn't been a move to sort of build up the capacity of the PG since that unfortunate stuff happened with Dimitri and Amari.
I'm just saying is what Dimitri is attempting to do was to make internal reforms because the PGRNA had become, the leadership had become really stagnant. And he was trying to set really some standards and procedures and principles that New Africans needed to develop within themselves and obligations that they had toward the nation to move things forward. Because what we have to understand with any movement, it's not personal, is that at times movements need to be reformed internally. It can be because of failed leadership. It could be because of a culture of inadequacy, a culture of really stagnation, a culture of just simply just meeting, saying, just saying free to land, being New Africans, really just once a year, Nation Day. So any organization can become sort of regressive and you need a reform movement. But what happens is when individuals who have been around, founders, influential, and have egos, then they have a problem. And oftentimes the ego becomes too big. That's what the word megalo means, is the ego becomes too big. It becomes crazy like, and it can become destructive. And we saw that within the Nation of Islam with Elijah Muhammad, regarding, Malcolm X. We saw that. And it's a tendency that Black organizations tend to have. And you highlighted earlier the church. I want to move on to the next inner baggage is mental illness. I find mental illness is something that we really don't want to address in our movement. And again, according to the creed, when you bring in mothers and fathers, brothers and sisters left by the wayside, wayside meaning a whole lot of marginalized Black folks who many of them have mental health issues.
Right.
And it's something that we really don't really talk about, really don't want to deal with. And those mental illnesses such as depression, anxiety, and when individuals have that where they go untreated or undiagnosed, those individuals become hard to get along with and they wreak havoc. They wreak havoc. Because you know what was interesting? I didn't know until about 2 years ago that Martin Luther King's mother was murdered by a Black guy who had severe mental illness. And he was just able to walk into church and kill Dr. King's mother.
Just unbelievable.
So what I'm saying is that we got people with mental illnesses, and to be honest, Malcolm X once said to an audience, he said, I was in prison. And he said, don't be shocked because I said I was in prison. He said, America means prison. So when we look at mental illnesses, brother, to be honest, most of us have that tendency in us because, again, we suffer genetically from post-traumatic slavery disorder. So it's something that we know. We know you can't enslave millions on top of millions of people through a Black Holocaust process, and they're not going to have tremendous trauma and mental illness. But the problem is we have this kind of stigma on one hand, shame, but also in the movement, there's an attitude from many Black men that, you know what, the man can't touch me mentally. I'm too strong for that.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, I'm the super revolutionary and, you know, the man can't touch me.
Yeah. And yet if you observe behavior within the movement, you know that there are a lot of people. There are people who come into the movement with inherited mental challenges. There is an ongoing, super pervasive and explosive mental health crisis in America. It is very prevalent in the Black community, and so when people come into our organizations and they absorb some degree of consciousness, consciousness alone does not resolve mental health issues. This is a misnomer and a misunderstanding. And then brothers who believe that they read so many books and become so conscious that they couldn't even possibly be a candidate are dead wrong in many instances. And we need to really work to change those attitudes. And within our organizations, we need to be delivering mental health relief and services to those who need it, and making people feel comfortable with admitting to, facing up to, and getting their mental health treated and getting their issues resolved. Because just from, again, the sheer oppression that we have been under that causes mental health issues, we know that many of us are dealing with mental health issues, and we need to be doing more to combat them.
Recently, a comrade, Haki Kweli Shakur, in a video, he was being interviewed, and he said that, you know, New Africans should have, you know, mental health programs for New Africans. And, you know,
yes, indeed,
we don't, because again, the reason why we don't is because we minimize it. And we really believe that somehow we, like the rappers say, somehow we untouchable and we unfadable. And the reality of it is oppression itself is pathology producing, And if you look at the data, and the data is just factual, Black people suffer more from mental health problems because we suffer more from oppression. I want to move on to drug and alcohol addiction, which to me is, we can combine that with mental illness. A lot of our people come into the movement addicted to drugs and alcohol. And
Right.
we know that a lot of our people that were drug addicts in the movement, many of them were compromised. And again, during COINTELPRO, these individuals were used against the movement.
Definitely.
And one of the things that Matula Shakur, he understood that. He became a doctor in acupuncture, and it's great that that brother finally got released from prison. That he started BANA, the Black Acupuncture Association of North America, in using acupuncture to address and treat massive heroin addiction in Harlem, because there were Black Panther members who were drug addicts and became informants, or who gave critical information to New York undercover and the FBI. So again, drug and alcohol addiction is something similar to mental illnesses that we really don't address.
Mm-hmm.
We don't address.
No, and it's sad because there are so many people who could be helping. These are all issues that can't just be left to remain the way they are. The representatives of the provisional government need to be looking at these things that do not exist and seeing how they can sponsor these programs and encourage these programs and encourage changes. Local active units need to be in their localities coming up with ways to address these issues and prevent these issues, and bringing in programs or having programs to refer their people to when they see these issues rearing their heads, and having ways to address them. Because if not, this type of stuff is and will continue to disrupt and destroy organizations.
And next is
progress from being made.
Next inner baggage is criminal mentality. And oftentimes, a lot of times our people are forced into crimes, and then one can develop really a criminal mentality. And usually the crimes are committed against Black people, whether it's Black on Black violence, selling dope to Black people, or whatever criminal methods are being used. But often individuals, when they come into the movement, they just believe, if I read revolutionary books and I can start using revolutionary rhetoric, that my criminal mentality has been transformed. But generally, though, the criminal mentality is often connected to points that we've already talked about. Oftentimes, the criminal mentality consists of brothers using drug and alcohol. A lot of brothers in the streets do have mental illnesses. Many of them have megalomaniac, tendencies. Most guys in the street that's out here, engaging in crime, they're doing it from an individualistic standpoint, either for them or just my family or my crew. So oftentimes when guys who engaged in crime, when they think of the criminal mentality, they just think in a sense of their criminal activities, but they don't understand the criminal mentality contains a lot of this inner baggage also.
Definitely. Comrade, there is, this belief that diving into books and learning Black revolutionary rhetoric, reading revolutionary theory, which is a key part of transitioning to a higher state of political consciousness. But this thought that it is the end all be all, and it somewhat makes you bulletproof to the old ways of your criminal mentality, the invisible man syndrome that used to plague you, the mental health issues that have existed in your family, in your community, and the individualism that you used to operate with every day of all of your life. That somehow, if you just dive in and master a certain amount of books, that it is going to be like a shield and protect you from those things and make you that which you have not been all of your life. That is a fallacy, a supreme fallacy, and it is almost fantasy.
Well,
And
I want to just briefly state this because, Sanyika Shakur, a new African, a comrade who died, well, not that long ago, during COVID, he represented the transformation of a criminal mentality, gang mentality, a Crip mentality into a revolutionary new African. However, Sanyika was plagued by these other inner baggages, and they were really not dealt with. And it's something that needs to at least be said, because it's really something that, if you read Stanley Tookie Williams' book, Blue Rage, Black Redemption, one of the things he said he regretted the most was turning on Sanyika. At the time, his name was Cody Scott. When he was 14, he turned him on to Sherm. He regretted that because even, while Tookie was in prison, he knew that Sanyika was getting out, coming back. He knew that he had this issue with smoking Sherm. And I say that to say, based on what I read, that the brother, what I knew of, and then what I read, he had like a history of substance abuse problems. And unfortunately, a lot of the issues that oftentimes a brother, he focused on the criminal mentality to a revolutionary mentality, as you mentioned, is a panacea, without addressing all the other inner baggages that contribute to the criminal mentality. They weren't really addressed. And unfortunately, that brother was found dead, according to various news reports, found dead in a homeless encampment outside of San Diego, California. And getting back to the point about mental illness and substance abuse, it's sort of a shame that this brother was a significant new African, albeit trouble, that if it's true based on these reports, this brother died in an encampment instead of new Africans having some type of program, whether it was in Detroit, whether it's in LA, Atlanta, or even in California, where this brother could link up with, and we didn't have that in place.
And it really, this attitude that we're not going to deal with that. I'm super political. I'm super cool. I can't be touched by that stuff. Is just historically laughable. Dr. Matulu Shakur, as you said, he showed us the way. He showed us that not only was that not the case, but that there had to be an active program and active initiatives to address these issues. Malcolm X, when he was in the Nation of Islam, he understood very clearly that people were coming into the movement with all types of demons, as they used to say, that needed to be conquered in order for them to become helpful, upstanding members of the Nation of Islam up under his watch. And we have to do that. And I'm sure there were some people who were around Cody Scott who were like, man, this is monster. I know from his history and his past, yeah, he battling some stuff, but he can handle it. He's strong enough. And we just see that once again, no. When you see your comrades struggling with different issues, you need to try and embrace them and have them to address those issues. And even before that, we as conscious New Africans, we have to work to develop programs and action steps to address our people's issues, because we know we're gonna see these issues. It's not the question of if, it's the question of when. These issues are in our people, they are amongst us. We never know where we're gonna see it pop up next, but under this type of capitalist oppression, anybody can become homeless at any time, and we have to be ready to address these issues.
Brother Richard, we got just about 5 minutes left. The last point I just want to briefly mention, and is a lack of political consciousness, is that we bring people in the movement and we really don't raise their political consciousness, and individuals really don't understand really what we're up against. They really don't understand what white supremacy is. They really don't understand what capitalism is. They really don't understand class consciousness and the class struggles internally in the Black community. And they're just underdeveloped and just don't have the capability to understand what's going on. And they walk around, naively, and that naivety can become very detrimental. Brother Richard, I want to kind of end. We went over, and I would say this was part 1, and we can get together again to address part 2, which deals with the transformation process, where we learn how to be New African citizens, which is an embodiment really of the New African Creed. So, brother, do you have any closing comments?
Yes, in closing, I just want to give a shout out to all of the brothers and sisters down in South Carolina celebrating, embracing, and commemorating New African Nation Day at the conference this weekend. Enjoy yourselves, be safe, wear masks whenever possible. And I just want to say for everybody watching this, just keep in mind that when we go through these different things, we're looking at all this stuff, we look at individuals and groups that have come and things that have been done. We practice constructive criticism. We look at critiquing things in a constructive way, not just trying to throw dirt on people or in any type of way like that. Not as the young people always say about hating, but we have done a lot of good things in our past. We've also made a lot of mistakes, and we have to look at those mistakes as a people and critique them in order to learn from them, move past them and move over them, and make sure that we don't repeat them or have them go on a constant repeat cycle in our present and in our future, because those mistakes have hurt a lot of people, and they will continue to hold us back and even destroy us in our future if we allow them. We don't intend to allow them. So we practice constructive criticism and critiquing. We look back in order to look forward and project and build a better future. Free the land.
As the old saying goes, people who don't learn from history are doomed to repeat it. All right, Brother Richard, thanks for being on, and rebuild the win, brother.
Rebuild the win. Free the land.